Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour. My name is Kevin Bosch. I am the chair of the Pearson Centre, and welcome to our podcast and video recording today. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that, well, I am sitting on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Algonquin people, who we are partnering with in the journey of reconciliation. I'd like to also begin by thanking the sustaining sponsors of the Pearson Centre. These are the folks that keep us going all year long. Number one, MAPCO, the Ontario's Professional Employees Union. Bruce Power, the Canadian Building Trades Union. The Cannabis Council of Canada. FASCN, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. Sandstone Group, and TikTok Canada. We thank all of them eternally for their ongoing sponsorship. Today, we're very lucky to have former minister, longtime MP, Sergio Marchi, who has written a new book. It's called Pursuing a Public Life, How to Succeed in the Political Arena. Sergio, as many know, is a former community activist, city councillor, member of parliament, minister of international trade, environment, and citizenship and immigration. After voluntarily leaving the political arena, which most don't get to do, he was appointed Canadian ambassador to the World Trade Organization and the United Nations agencies in Geneva. Given that he's talking about how to survive in the political arena, we thought it would be good to get some young folks who are starting their careers in the political environment to interview him. So moderating our discussion today will be Sofia Robinson. She's the Pearson Centre's research assistant, currently studied at the University of British Columbia, and Neva Moffat, a recent University of Ottawa graduate, currently working at the House of Commons. So Neva and Sofia, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome, Sergio, and have a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Awesome. Let's get started. So first, we just wanted to start by thanking you again for speaking with us here today. And we'd like to begin by asking what made you decide to write Pursuing a Public Life at this particular time?
Well, thank you, Sofia, to you, to Neva, and to Pam and Kevin of the Pearson Centre for this opportunity. The push for me writing this book was a pretty deep concern on how many Canadians, including young Canadians, are giving a pass to political life. And that was something that I felt during public life when we would reach out to people if they had any aspirations to become a political candidate. And then it continued when I was teaching at the university level. I would regularly ask my students how many would like to go into public service, and out of a classroom of about 25 or so people, maybe 2 or 3 hands would go up. And so I recognized that our politics has become a little more divisive, a little more polarized, a little more nasty, and that's probably not helping encourage people to run. But I remain convinced that for all the potential of artificial intelligence, AI will not run a country. AI will not provide empathy. AI will not promote and safeguard our values as a country. We will always need good people, bold voices, and big ideas. And so that's why I wrote the book. It's only part memoir and part how-to. In other words, here are the steps from nominations to campaigning to governing that you need to account for if you want to make a successful go. So I'm hopeful that it will help some people who are thinking about public life but don't know the ins and outs. And that was basically the reason for putting pen to paper.
Sounds good. And while there have been many young individuals a little discouraged about running for politics, we did see in the most recent election a surge of younger candidates and MPs getting elected in federal politics. Throughout your book, you emphasize that good leaders are made through experience and reflection, not age. What advice would you give to the new generation of younger MPs who may struggle to be taken seriously in politics? And how can they turn their youthfulness into a political strength?
Yeah, no, I noticed that as well. I'm still concerned, even though there was some good news to take, as you said, from the recent crop of candidates, because when you look at our sitting MPs, barely 3% are under the age of 30. And so that's not reflective of the Canada that is the reality. And so we need to continue to up that number. And what I would say, the first thing I would say, and it might sound simplistic, but the first attribute is work hard. There are no shortcuts in any career, especially in public when you're dealing with Canadians and with fellow colleagues, with the opposition. You need to work hard, you need to work smart, you need to invest. Nothing comes for free, but if you work hard, good things will come your way. Secondly, I would say to young candidates or young MPs, pick your spot. Focus. In other words, when you're sitting in the caucus room, or if you're fortunate enough to be sitting in the cabinet room, try not to speak on every issue that comes forward, because I think that makes you less influential. I remember in caucus when some people would get up for almost every single issue, week in and week out. And that would have a negative impact, even though they didn't think it did, because they thought, well, if I bring my voice to caucus, the prime minister will hear it, ministers will hear it. And they do hear it, but they also at the same time tune out. So a lot of people would turn to their Globe and Mail by comparison to someone who would pick their spot and not speak very frequently. When that person got up to go to the microphone, then the Globe and Mail was put down and the ears perked. So I'd say you pick your spots. Don't be a know-it-all. Use your ears initially as much as your mouth. It might sound crass, but that's been my experience. Thirdly, from a policy perspective, focus as well. And politicians are known to be generalists, which is true, because when you get elected, your constituents ask you from A to Z. So you kind of have to know something about everything without going too deep on many matters. But notwithstanding that generalist characteristic of politicians, I think when you enter a caucus, especially in opposition, but the same thing with government, is you should focus on a couple of policy areas and become very, very versatile or specialized. Because what that would mean is that the political party would turn to you for that expertise. Or if you had an expertise in health, you might be made the health critic if you're in opposition, or the health minister if you're in government. But the media will also turn to you if they know that you are offering some degree of expertise. NGOs and your stakeholders will turn to you and invite you on panels and conferences. So by specializing in a couple of policy niche areas, then I think you can increase your profile and garner the respect at a time that you need it, especially when you're young. If you get colleagues acknowledging the kind of value add that you would bring. And lastly, if I'm a young member of parliament, I would spend time in the House of Commons, even when I'm not speaking. And it's just to soak it in. Listen to how people speak. Listen to what they say. Look at their body language. Go to committees as well. Study committees. See how issues are treated. See what works and what doesn't. And also talk to fellow politicians and garner advice. You'd be surprised. Fellow politicians are more than happy to recount their experiences for you, and even former politicians who've got considerable experience. It's all about the learning curve, and those MPs went through the same things as the young MPs anyway. So those are a few tidbits that I would relay on to newly elected MPs who are on the young side, and ultimately be patient. If you're young, time is on your side. Don't rush. Don't be overly ambitious. Never knee-jerk an important issue or question. Always reflect on it. So be patient. You've got lots of runway.
Thank you so much for that. That was some valuable advice. So you write in your book that when you're an elected official, you're public property 24/7. What are some tips you have for young people who may want to run for office, but also want to maintain some kind of work-life balance?
Yeah. No, that's you picked on a very, very important issue. And I find today's youth generation much better prepared to do that balance than I was. Frankly, I didn't succeed in having that balance. I was elected as a member of parliament at 28 years of age. And because of that, I was full of idealism. I was full of energy. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to do well for my constituents. I wanted to be seen to be doing well, which meant that I was in the riding every weekend. So I missed a lot of birthdays and anniversaries of my family, which I regret because you can never have that back. So I think young people get it much better in terms of a work-life balance. And I think the parliamentary precinct has recognized that. So right now you have many, many less votes in the evening or evening debates. So in the old days, sometimes you'd be voting at 2 or 3 in the morning, and you couldn't get home, and you'd miss dinners and you'd miss everything else. Whereas today, I think the parliament recognizes that they've had to make changes to allow people to also be fathers and mothers to their families, which is important. Secondly, I would dedicate at least the Sunday to be off limits. So again, sometimes you're in the house between Monday and Thursday. Sometimes you leave for your constituency on Friday. I would get back on the Saturday so you can have one holy day, not necessarily spent in a church or a synagogue, but spent with your family, go on bike rides with the kids, take them skiing in the winter, because I think that is very important and expected of you as either a mother, a father, a wife, or a husband, because you have to recognize that once your political career is done, the phone won't ring as much, you won't get as many emails, but you better have your family by your side, because if you've lost all balance and lost your family, you really have lost it all. So I think you need to also be very mindful of that, but also mindful of your own health, both physically and mentally, not just taking the time to be with your family, but also for yourself to tune out and rejuvenate and recalibrate. In my time, the worst word in the dictionary for me was no. I hated saying no. So there was always one more meeting, one more speech, one more parade, one more dinner, one more lunch. And when you kept saying yes, you get taxed, right? And you've got little time left and you're depleted. So I think the current crop have to learn when to say yes, but at the same time also when to say no, and not to feel guilty about it, because it's not a sin to want to be with your family. You don't have to be a slave, even if you're dealing with the public 24/7. You can say no, and you know what? People will appreciate the fact that you need some space for your family, because most of the people who are looking at you and talking to you have families of their own. But I think young people come to the job much better than my generation did when it comes to the whole issue of work-life balance. I'd also suggest that if you're not from Ottawa, I would move your family to Ottawa. I did that. And so, Monday to Friday, they were with me. There'd be always breakfasts, increasingly dinners. And then when you go to your riding, you can go to town for your constituents without knowing that you have to put some time in with the family. And I've counseled that to everybody who sought me out. And sometimes newly elected MPs are afraid that their constituents will react negatively on learning that your family has moved to Ottawa. And my advice was always, I can count on one hand the number of people who were critical of me, and those who were mostly partisan to try to make you look bad. I remember in all candidates meetings, people would stand up very innocently and say, "Mr. Marchi, where does your family live?" And I would say, "In Ottawa." And they'd come back, of course, "Oh, why? Our riding isn't good enough?" And I said, "No, you didn't elect them You elected me. And why would you not want me as a father to put my kids to sleep as many evenings as I can, just like you? So it's got nothing to do with the writing not being sufficient. It's the question of how you want to be as a family and safeguard the family. So don't be afraid, is my advice, of moving your family to Ottawa, because especially in big urban centers, many people don't even know who their MP is, irregardless of where their family lives. So do what is right by your family, and that will, I think, do you right with constituents by and large.
That's some really great advice, I think, for individuals to continue that work-life balance, as it's very important for everyone. We're going to turn the conversation a little bit over to social media and how that plays into effect. And so in the era of social media, it's easy to express strong, often toxic views anonymously. Do you see a link between social media and the polarization of the political discourse here in Canada?
I think so. And I think it's not only a Canadian feature, I think it's a global phenomenon, given the technology of social media taking the world by storm. Number one, I'm old fashioned and I always preach old fashioned stuff. So I will tell the youngsters, social media, of course, is a huge reality and a huge tool. But I would always say never replace face to face meetings. Never replace phone calls where you're talking to another human being. Never replace personal letters that you should do to constituents or to your prime minister or to your ministers or bureaucracy. Social media should be a complement. It shouldn't replace the more traditional lines of communication. And I think that's a problem. I mean, I deal with some people who don't want to talk by phone. I'll say in the email, listen, we've gone back and forth 6 times on that. Let's have a phone call and settle it. And they say, oh, no, I'm too busy. And so it's less humanizing, social media. It has incredible reach, of course, but less humanizing from my standpoint. And secondly, you're right. Social media gives a license to the extremists to do their thing. People come out of dark corners, say ugly things. People then feed off of that. And, when people go low, other people go lower. And it, as you said, it contributes to a toxic environment. And all too many social media hits are extreme. And therefore, of course, the discourse going to lead toward a more extremist viewpoint. I also think that Donald Trump has legitimized, unfortunately, a lot of the extreme negativities and has almost made it more acceptable, even though I don't accept his abysmal behavior. Others do. Others believe his conspiracy theories. Others believe his extreme views. And that all takes a hit on the temperature, on the body politic. And if you notice our politics, I don't think our politics is as negative and as bad as the American political scene today. But I do think, without glorifying my time in office, that today's discourse compared to my days has become more divisive, more nasty, and more polarized. And so we've got to figure out how to turn around the Titanic. And it starts with the politicals. They have to recognize that extreme language results in extreme actions. And we see how MPs have been accosted, right? In elevators, people have thrown stones at our former prime minister. People get accosted in their constituency office. So there's considerable more verbal and somewhat physical abuse that comes from an extreme discord. And social media, unfortunately, needs to take a bow and accept part of the blame. And I hope we can have enough of our political leaders recognize that this is putting off Canadians, and we need to change the tone of our language and the tone of our actions. if we're to attract the attentions of Canadians and if we're to encourage more people to run, because the more toxic the environment, the less people are willing to go.
Thank you so much. And our next question actually kind of goes off of what you were saying. So continuing on the topic of polarization, I think it's fair to say that many Canadians are looking at the current political climate in the US with a sense of horror. And as you mentioned, Canada might be moving sort of towards the direction of the US currently. If you think this is the case, do you have any ideas about how we can reverse course and kind of stop it before it's too late?
Well, first of all, we should replace Trump as soon as possible. I don't think he's the only source, but he has really moved the radar on an extreme kind of brand of politics. When I teach, I always say to my students, don't lose hope. I mean, our politics has gotten tougher and rougher, yes. I think it's part and parcel of a global phenomenon for lots of reasons. But I said, never forget that Canada is still in a pretty decent place. We have a very strong democracy. We have a very strong rule of law. We have elections that are pretty verifiable. We have a policy of multiculturalism. We generally are generous when it comes to immigration, although that is changed a little bit because of the numbers and the shortage of housing. But it's been pretty generous and steady for a long time. The way we pick our Supreme Court justices by comparison to the Americans, for example, is without controversy. So there are a lot of and independent institutions that don't necessarily work for the powerful, but work for the people. So we've got a lot of assets. What we have to raise is the caliber of our politics. Our democracy is stronger than our brand of politics, in my opinion. And so we've got to raise the political culture to get away from some of this extremity in our discourse that we see. For instance, in parts of Europe, I mean, political leaders and political movements are born from anti-immigration rhetoric, for example, right? There's a lot of bad vibes and hatred and racism. And, you know, they put all the blame on the doorstep of refugees and immigrants. And of course, you know, many people will react favorably to that. And all of a sudden, your country moves and it doesn't allow you to be as progressive on migration as you should. So, first of all, we should recognize that we have certain strengths in our democracy, and we should make doubly sure that we protect those assets. And secondly, it's up to the politicians to become a little more mature, a little more responsible, and be cognizant of when you pass the red line, what people feel. And if you have bad political behavior, it should be addressed, and there should be an accountability of sorts, because nothing turns people off by political bad behavior that goes unchecked.
That's a good sentiment around how to move forward, I think, past some of the direction that the US is going currently. I wanted to speak a little bit about women in politics. And so in your chapter on communication and leadership, you discuss resilience and professionalism under pressure. Women in politics today face even greater scrutiny, especially online. From your perspective, how can these challenges, though unfair, build stronger and more empathetic leaders? And what can parties and institutions do better to support them? What can they do better?
Yes, I know I've discussed this with Pam in the past. I've discussed this with former women colleagues in the House. Their path to the House of Commons generally has been a much more arduous one. Sometimes women candidates aren't given the green light in good ridings, winnable ridings for their particular party, and there the blame should be on the party, because if you're concerned about elevating the number of women in Parliament or elevating the number of young Canadians in Parliament, then because the party is very much in the driver's seat when it comes to ridings and nominations, they should really try to consciously encourage women and young candidates in winnable ridings. For me, it doesn't count when you say, well, we had 130 women run for us, which is a record number. And my question to them would be, okay, how many are elected? I mean, if the bulk were in ridings that we didn't have a chance, let's say as a Liberal Party, then that boast is half empty, right? Because it's the results that count. Now, not everybody can be in the most winnable of riding, but the party should take a step back, look at the big periphery, and consider their options. If it's important to raise the number of women candidates for becoming women MPs, which I believe is the case, then I think you should do something about it. I think, secondly, the Parliament, as I mentioned earlier, is beginning to understand how important it is to maintain family. And when it comes to women, without generalizing, a lot of women are the heads of their family. A lot of women take care of the home front. A lot of women take care of the children. And so they have a huge multitask if and when they also want to run for public office. And so eliminating night seatings and eliminating late night votes and eliminating sometimes the travel. I think having a parliament that's more online virtually is important, so people from Vancouver don't have to go back and forth every weekend. I think that would make life generally easier for parliamentarians, but particularly for women parliamentarians who have all those other responsibilities. I also think another important avenue is fundraising, because when I was talking to fellow female candidates and colleagues, one of the problems is that sometimes women had difficulties fundraising compared to their male counterparts. Not all of them, but many did. And so there again, a party can dedicate itself. If someone is running in a riding and the person is a woman, then you got to be cognizant about how can we help her raise the necessary funding to make her competitive in the election, because it's a reality. You don't need a lot of money in politics in Canada. The United States do, because they've got no limits, and money is corrosive in the American system. Whereas the great thing about Canada is we have limits. I mean, my limit on my last campaign in 1997 was $75,000, which meant I couldn't spend $75,500. Because if I did, and it was proven, I would forfeit my seat. That's a powerful, powerful red line. And it's a great equalizer. It means that a person of modest means like myself can run against a billionaire, because in Canada, the billionaire can't plop down $1 billion for the campaign. He or she will have to plop down the maximum that is allowed based on the number of electors in your riding. So that's a tremendous benefit in Canada. But notwithstanding that, how can novice politicians best raise money? How can parties assign their professional fundraisers to those people to make them successful? So there's a number of things that I think the onus is on the party establishment if we want the Parliament of Canada to look like the modern face of Canada. Then we got to put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you so much. That was super interesting. So, moving towards some kind of lessons that you've learned or more advice for young people, you began your own political career at the local level before moving into federal politics. So, in your experience, why was starting at a municipal or community politics level such a vital foundation, and how could that be helpful for young people who hope to make a broader impact later on in their careers?
Yeah. Well, I entered politics on the strength of my community activism. When I was my last year in high school and all 4 years of my university, I think I was spending more time out in the community than I was in the classroom, which was driving my parents nuts, because as Italian immigrants, education was close to the top of their priority list. My parents, after the war and depression, barely finished grade school. So it drove them nuts for them to see their son spend more time up and about the community and my marks tanking. And a number of times they said, well, if you're going to work in the community, at least get paid for it. They didn't understand the whole thing of volunteerism. And so for me, there was a direct relationship. When I graduated in urban planning, I said, I like urban planning, but I love my community work more. What can I do to do more of that? And politics was the answer, because politics is all about serving the community, pure and simple. And so I would always advise young people to, if you can afford it, become a volunteer. Join a cause that you believe in, because at a young age, voluntary work is hugely important, because young people don't have experience. A volunteer's job gives you experience. A young person doesn't have the profile of a later, more older person. This gives you the ability to begin to write that profile. A young person doesn't necessarily have a well-oiled network. Well, volunteering gives you, or starts you off in getting for you to know people who can help you later. So the volunteer base for me was hugely important, and I think it's hugely important for young Canadians if they can afford it. And the other thing I would say is, you don't necessarily need to enter the municipal level as a springboard to federal or provincial. You can, and oftentimes parties recruit mayors and councillors and so on. But you can also run for politics municipally and make it a career. It could be very satisfying, because it's a very satisfying type of representation. You are the boss. There's no political parties in Ontario municipal campaigns. Once you're elected, you live or die by what you do, and you're influential, because while a mayor is first among equals, guess what? A mayor has only one vote, and I have one vote as a councillor. So you will be sought for that power, for that influence. And the last thing I'd say about municipal politics, unlike the more senior levels, is in a municipal career, you can see the fruits of your labor very quickly. Building a park doesn't take 10 years. Fixing roads doesn't take 10 years. Fixing the lights don't take 10 years. Fixing disputes don't take 10 years. Building recreation centers, increasing police, schools. In other words, when you practice a municipal brand of political representation, you and the people that you serve will see the fruits of your labor very quickly, much more quickly than federally and provincially, where you're part of a much bigger team on much more sophisticated pieces of legislation. So volunteering, I think, is an ace for youngsters for all the reasons I said. And secondly, if you start municipally, it's okay to finish municipally as well.
That is very good advice for some individuals who are wanting to jump in, and they jump in at the municipal level. I do, though, want to talk a little bit more about the federal level. You obviously write candidly about the lessons you've learned in the various cabinet positions you held, and you emphasize that leadership isn't limited to titles. From your time in Parliament, how did you see backbenchers and parliamentary secretaries shape government policy and accountability, even without the ministerial posts that they might have been awarded or given?
Yes, I'm big on the fact that you don't need a big fancy title to be leaders. Some of the best leaders in the world, like the Ukrainian people who are pushing back in all ways, are leaders and are heroes. And so many an MP and parliamentary secretary would impress the prime minister by their hard work, by the value that they bring, by the words that they speak in caucus, where the prime minister takes notes about what people say. And oftentimes when an MP would make a real passion plea to the minister of some title to change because of what he's hearing or she's hearing in the riding, that impresses the prime minister, because when the prime minister would rise at the end of caucus to make his summaries, sometimes it would include a directive to that minister to meet with that member of parliament, or for that minister to go back to the drawing board. So there can be huge influence if you play your cards right. And as I said earlier, you shouldn't play your cards all the time and speak on every issue that comes and goes. You pick your spots, you become an expert in your field, and people will notice. The prime minister will notice, other ministers will notice you, the media will notice you and come to you for interviews. NGOs and stakeholders will notice you and want you at their conferences because all of a sudden you bring something to the table. So when you're first elected, if you're not in the cabinet on the government side, and especially if you're young, don't sweat it. Be patient with your ambition. Know that you have a long runway. Know that you'll still be active when the leader is long retired. So I think individual members of parliament can make an influence. And as long as you know that, as long as you're not prepared to see that as a defeat because you weren't named a cabinet minister, take your job seriously, work hard, and make a difference. And the world will notice. Just when you think they don't, you get a call to go to cabinet, which means they did notice you. So even if you start at the bottom of the ladder, which is the typical way that life works, you can climb that slippery ladder rung by rung by doing serious work and knowing that the environment around you will notice. If you say nothing and do nothing, you will go nowhere.
I love that advice about working hard and being patient. It's been so inspiring hearing all of your great advice and insights today. And now I'm going to turn it back to Kevin for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much. That was an inspiring discussion. Thank you, Sergio, for making time for us. I was a staffer on the Hill during the Chrétien government. I remember well, you were the go-to guy that Mr. Chrétien would often hand the difficult files to, and you handled them all really well and were an inspiration to all of us in what it meant to provide good government and lead our nation. I would definitely like to thank Neva and Sofia for the fantastic job you did in interviewing this today. I know we've not heard the last of your names, and I certainly hope that you consider running for office one day or contributing in some other way to public policy, because there are many ways to do that. And I would again like to thank our sustaining sponsors for the Pearson Centre. These are the folks that keep us going all year long, and we're very grateful for their support. MAPCO, Ontario's professional employees, Bruce Power, the Canadian Building Trades Union, the Cannabis Council of Canada, FASTCAN, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, Sandstone Group, and TikTok Canada. We really appreciate your support. Our next event is going to be a podcast, a video featuring Alex Lantier, one of our board members, who's interviewing the legendary cabinet minister, André Roulette, who was the Quebec lieutenant during the Quebec referendum, which we are marking the 30th anniversary of. And they're going to discuss en français what happened in 1995 and how that's impacted the Quebec of today and relations across the country. So I hope you'll all join us for that. I would just like to thank everybody for participating. I thank you, folks, for listening and your interest in this. Really appreciate you giving us your time. And à la prochaine. Merci beaucoup. Bye.
Yeah, I also say thank you to you, Kevin and Pam, for this initiative. Very, very appreciated. And to Sofia and to Neva, the best is yet to come for you too.
Hear, hear. I agree. Thanks, everybody. Merci. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.